Hello, my name is James Godby, and many years ago now, in 1987, I saw a geometric diagram that changed my life forever. It was a beautiful collection of circles and triangles in a square, with each form flowing naturally one from the next, and it included the squaring of the circle, the Great Pyramid, the magical proportions of phi, the golden mean, and pi, as well as the Pythagorean right triangle. But embedded within these sacred and primal forms were the earth and the moon. Their inclusion in what I've come to call the Earth-Moon diagram is not explained by any science, nor could it possibly have happened by accident or coincidence or chance. But I had no idea what it meant. In the video that you are about to see, this will be the first geometric proof shown. Then, years later, I had a truly transcendent experience and had the almost inconceivable thought that perhaps this was an intentional expression of the most primal and sacred geometry known, a geometry that does not manifest anywhere in the observed universe. If this were so, it meant to me that this was a communication. There is a geometric shape that is the genesis of all that is. It is called the vector equilibrium, or Stillpoint geometry. 12 points around a central point, with all vectors or distances between points being equal. It is a geometry that describes a point that does not exist. It is a geometry that does not manifest, yet the Platonic solids are derived from it, and from them, the entire table of elements, the building blocks of manifestation, the world that we live in. Everything in the manifested universe is generated from one still, primal, fundamental point. I began to search for a connection between the Earth-Moon diagram that I had seen so long ago and this primal, still, most sacred geometry, and discovered that yes, the dimensions of the Earth, the Moon, and the Sun are intentional and symbolic expressions of this Stillpoint geometry. And this will be the second geometric proof that you will see in the following animation. The animation now begins, looking towards the center of our galaxy, and then, closer to home, moves back from the Sun to Mercury and Venus before focusing on the Moon and Earth. The prolific scientist and engineer Buckminster Fuller called this Stillpoint geometry the nearest approach we will ever know to eternity in God. In the Kabbalistic tradition, it is called Keter, the point of creation at the crown of the tree of life, and the very interface between the Kabbalah's Ein, the limitless mind of God, with all of creation, the very point of connection. In the Vedic tradition's Rig Veda, India's most ancient spiritual scripture, we are told that the universe was born and developed from a core, central point. It is called the Mahabindu, the point representing simultaneously the source of creation and the transcendence of all polarities and the final integration at the end of the spiritual journey. It is the Alpha and the Omega. It is the most primal and fundamental geometry there is. Just as consciousness precedes all manifestation, so does the Stillpoint geometry. They are synonymous. It is the geometry of consciousness. What you are about to see is an animation that demonstrates that this Stillpoint geometry, a geometry that does not manifest, has been intentionally and symbolically embedded in the dimensions of the Earth, Moon, and Sun. I believe that this is a communication. Unlike the normal indifference so prevalent everywhere in the observed universe, this is a communication having to do with the unequaled importance of expanded, enlightened consciousness. What you are about to see is a bodhisattvic, compassionate act, proving the existence of an evolved higher consciousness, almost infinitely evolved relative to our own, and responsible for the creation of our solar system, and offers irrefutable empirical proof that this is so. It also asks the question, why? Why would the higher intelligence responsible for the creation of our solar system 4.6 billion years ago embed the Stillpoint, or consciousness geometry, in the dimensions of the Earth, Moon, and Sun as a communication to evolving humanity? The implications are worldview shattering. The story now begins with the creation of the Earth-Moon diagram that I had seen so many years ago. First, we draw the circumference of Earth, the circle of Earth. Then, we draw a square that is tangent to this Earth circle, and designate 1 as the radius of Earth. And then we create another, larger circle whose circumference equals the perimeter of the square. In sacred geometric terms, this is called marrying heaven and earth, or squaring the circle. We now draw a line from the center upwards until it touches the larger circle. From this point, we extend lines to each end of the diameter of Earth, creating the cross-section of the Great Pyramid, the mystical shape that is an expression of the magical and fundamental numbers of proportion, pi and phi. We now draw a smaller circle tangent to the circle of Earth, whose center is the apex of the Great Pyramid. The circumference of this circle is that of the moon. Remember, we began arbitrarily with the circle of Earth, with each form naturally flowing from one form to the next, and end with the smaller circle being the diameter of the moon. There is no scientific explanation for this other than coincidence. The evidence is overwhelming. This did not happen by chance. There is something equally profound that does not happen by chance. The total eclipse of the sun by the moon. This dramatic dance in the sky occurs because it just so happens that while the sun is exactly 400 times larger than the moon, it also just happens to be exactly 400 times further away from the Earth than the moon at the time of perfect, total eclipse. If not coincidence, then what? There is only one explanation for this. The Earth and the Moon were created intentionally. But why, and by whom? What follows is proof that the Earth, Moon, and Sun are intentionally created expressions of the non-manifesting vector equilibrium or Stillpoint geometry, the most primal of all geometry. The geometry of consciousness. This is a communication. We begin with the moon as the first layer sphere in the vector equilibrium geometry. Then we add 12 spheres around this central sphere, creating the second layer, adding more and more layers. This three-dimensional vector equilibrium stillpoint geometry will now be shown in 2 dimensions, creating the familiar flower of life pattern. Once again, with the moon as the first layer sphere. Here is the second layer sphere. And here is the third layer sphere. An octahedron is now created that is tangent to this third layer sphere at its faces. This third layer sphere now expands until it is tangent to the octahedron at its edges. At the instant of contact, the Earth is created, as well as the vector equilibrium. 12 points around 1, all vectors equal. The stillpoint geometry and consciousness are primal and fundamental. They are synonymous. The expression of this geometry in the dimensions of the Earth, Moon, and Sun is a communication to evolving consciousness on Earth, us, about the unequaled importance of enlightened consciousness. The stillpoint is the portal between the implicate world, the limitless mind of God, and the explicate world, the manifested world where the evolution of consciousness happens. I believe that we are being asked to open this portal from our side of the veil, triggering a global shift in human consciousness through resonance at the very moment in our collective history when we need it the most. What we have just seen is irrefutable empirical evidence that our Earth, Moon, and Sun, in fact our entire solar system, were intentionally created by an evolved bodhisattvic higher intelligence. Embedded within their dimensions is a communication, pointing directly to the non-manifesting, ultimately primal stillpoint geometry. The geometry of consciousness. But why? Why would the creators of our solar system do this? Our world is experiencing an unprecedented global crisis. Our biosphere has been irreparably poisoned. Our oceans and our forests, the 2 main sources of the oxygen that we breathe, are dying. Endless war has become a reality. Billions of people live in a kind of poverty that breeds hopelessness, and the threat of nuclear war is always with us. I know that most of us who care about such things have grown weary and exhausted from the daily assault of this grim drum that beats in the background of all of our lives. Many eminent people, the people that we have come to respect the most, Mahatma Gandhi, the Dalai Lama, Krishnamurti, Howard Zinn, Stanislav Grof, Albert Einstein, Irvin Laszlo, Nikola Tesla, Hannah Arendt, and Jane Goodall, and many other such people, have each said in their own way that without some kind of global transformation of consciousness, we are not going to be able to change the direction that the world is headed. And what has just been presented offers the only possibility that I know of that holds the potential to accomplish this. And this is the answer to the question why. and offers genuine hope in a world so compromised. I believe that we are being asked to open the portal that the Stillpoint interface is, exposing humanity to the almost infinitely higher frequency of this now proven, evolved, bodhisattvic higher consciousness, initiating the arising of compassion and the alleviation of the unconscionable suffering so rampant in the world today, as well as providing the potential to solve the worldwide crisis and propel us into our healthy future. In the following pages of this website, stillpointdesign.org, the case is made regarding how this might be accomplished and is addressed in depth in the book Stillpoint, The Geometry of Consciousness. Thank you for watching.